Mr. Clerk, you have priority motion.
I do, Mr. President. Senator Chambers would move to bracket Legislative Bill 395 until February 21.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Chambers, you are recognized to open on your bracket motion.
Thank you. Mr. President, members of the legislature, I am going to withdraw this motion after I have made a few points. You know why I do it that way? I had a motion like this on another bill, and a long discussion developed on that motion. If you want to talk about this particular motion, I can't stop you, but I'm telling you what my intentions are. And after I've had my opportunity to say what I intend to say, I'm going to withdraw the motion. If there are intervening speakers, I will have to wait until they finish speaking, have the opportunity to speak again, and then withdraw it. I believe with my opening and one or two opportunities, maybe just one, I can say what I have to say. That is not to impede debate, because I believe in full-fledged, ongoing debate, even when it's of the type that occurred yesterday, and that's what brings me to this position. It was not very edifying. It was like the kind of discussions that occur on a street corner or in a tavern, where people are making all of these unnuanced statements, drawing broad conclusions, and suggesting that if the state exercises its police powers, which is what happens when a law is passed that sees to the general welfare and health of society, people start talking about ice skating. Well, they can talk about anything they want to, but you need, when you're a lawmaker, in my view, to develop the ability to think in a nuanced way. I have 5 fingers on this hand. Each one is different. Because my thumb is opposable does not mean that every one of my fingers is, even though all of them are part of the hand. So when a person stands on the floor and says personal rights are involved, whose personal rights? You all see this differently from the way I do. I believe when you're engaging in social intercourse, I didn't say sexual, social intercourse, you should not be rude. You should not be inconsiderate. You should not be uncivil. It's not against the law to spit in front of somebody. It's not against the law to cough. It's not against the law to sneeze. But how many of you would cough on somebody? How many of you would sneeze on somebody? How many of you would hark and spit in a restaurant? You're not violating a law. There are some things that are considered rude and uncivil. And when you have what people often deem a nasty habit, which is not just nasty, but detrimental to other people's health, and you say the one who is inflicting that on somebody else has greater rights than the person who is the inflictee, then your standards are not the same as mine. And I don't think they're the same as most people in civilized society. What is happening here is a demonstration of the power of the tobacco lobby and the tobacco industry. They have been shown and documented to have lied, to have deliberately withheld information from the public as to the devastatingly harmful consequences of their products. Memos have been produced which convict in the way that the Bible says would happen to a person. By your words you shall be justified, by your words you shall be condemned. And the tobacco industry was condemned by its own words. And we have people on this floor talking about the right of these people who are rude, who are uncivil, to blow their health-harming smoke on other people. Others are being harmed by this. If you're not infected with a disease, your coughing is not going to harm me. And by the way, some people say it's because I am so virtuous, but I call it something else. I am so mean that I don't catch diseases that other people catch. A few months ago, I had walking pneumonia, I had bird flu, I had rhinovirus, I had several other ailments, and all that I had in the way of symptoms was a cough. It would have killed anybody else. I am prohibited by hospitals from walking through wards where people are seriously ill because my meanness kills bacteria, kills viruses, and what would become of the hospital's money-making capacity if somebody like that walked among their sick people? The legislature is to be composed of people who make laws. As far as people who think that banning smoking in the way this bill would do is going to result in banning skating or boxing or fighting or anything else, need to get a grip. We deal with issues as they come up. If a situation develops where skating is shown to be harmful to the public, we debate it at that time. When you're in the bar, you can say any old crazy, irresponsible thing because nobody pays attention to you anyway. And your colleagues and those lobbyists who put you all on your hobby horse and get you running won't tell you how foolish they make you look. Who wants to be uncivil? On this floor, I'm considered to be uncivil because I won't roll over and let people walk on me. I don't kowtow to the lobbyists, the governor, or anybody else. And when foolish, juvenile things are said on this floor, I'm going to deal with them. It's not like a professor trying to keep the fragile psyches of delicate students from shattering like Humpty Dumpty when he fell off the wall. Everybody who comes here is supposed to be girded and ready for battle. And if they're not, they ought to be quiet until they find out what's going on. But if they stick their head above this line, the top might get chopped off, and that's a part of learning. I'm not going to be standing up here in these nonsensical debates that have been going on, wasting my time. But I do watch and I listen, and I'm highly amused. And I've had subject for several rhymes about some of my colleagues. But I don't want to squelch anybody. The ability to enjoy and be entertained will be gone. They'll start thinking in a nuanced manner. And then they might begin to have a bit of effectiveness. And people might begin to listen to them. But as long as they stand up here with these broadsides and say, by God, somebody's got a personal right to blow smoke on somebody else. So what if it gives them cancer? So what if it gives them emphysema? These smokers have right. It's right there in the Constitution. In the Constitution. And you say, well, where in the Constitution? Well, read it and you'll find it. They don't read the Constitution. They don't care about the Constitution. They don't care about what we do as lawmakers, but I do, and I care about the legislature as an institution. But everybody on this floor has the right to express his or her view as he or she sees fit. That's why I always say, if a community wants to send a mule skinner here to represent them, they have that right. They know what it is they want in a representative, and if the mule skinner is the one, they send the mule skinner. If it's somebody who cannot make two statements together and they make sense, that's what they want. They knew what they were sending here. But I'm going to deal with the kind of things that they say on the floor to try to show that they're worthless, that they lack merit, that there's a trivialization of the process. But brothers and sisters, that is the process. That is the nature of the process. Senator White said people have a right to be stupid. Well, you know, senators have that right multiplied by 10. They were elected. And if they're stupid, they were elected on the basis of being stupid. And if they showed intelligence, they would be going against what their constituents sent them here to do. Thank you, Madam President.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from the 11th Legislative District in Omaha, our senior member.
Mr. President, members of the legislature, I like to clean up the little things first before I get to the big thing. You say tomato, I say tomato, you say potato, I say potato. But tomato, tomato, potato, potato, let's call the whole thing off. You say Bible, I say Bible. And mine is as correct as yours. Members of the legislature, what Senator Carlson talked about makes a lot of sense. If you're going to define harm to children as child abuse, ban it wherever it occurs. And I challenge you to offer that amendment, if that's your belief. I've tried to get amendments, and I had to put them on other bills, to stop people from letting children drink liquor at home. And I'd like to stop it in churches, too, because the hypocrisy is being shown to the children. They hear all this talk about don't do this or don't do that, then it's done at home and in church. That's why children say, I don't listen to these old fogies. They tell me something they do worse than I do. I see the preacher hitting on young girls. In fact, young girls will go and say how the preacher's trying to hit her on her. That means make advances to her. When we were talking, you all were talking about the foster parents. I think it was Senator Erdman who reduced it to an either-or situation. That either the children are going to be in the homes of good foster parents who smoke, or the homes of bad parents who don't smoke. So the conclusion is, if you don't smoke, you're a bad parent. If you're a good parent, you smoke. That's nonsense, and that's the kind of lack of reasoning I'm talking about. But it carries a lot of weight around here because it has an allure. You need to look through that and disregard it. I'm going to hold up that HHS bill until we finish 395, because the word that comes first usually is one that's most important. The first word here is health. So I'm going to hold it up. And as thick as that bill is, I can do it. So now y'all want to play hardball? We're going to play hardball. You think the lobby has power? I'm going to show you, like I've said before. The Emperor Radcliffe doesn't set the agenda in here. He might be able to get senators to do certain things, but as long as I'm on this floor, there's one above the Emperor. There's a story of Esau and Jacob, and Senator Carlson can tell you this is true, and I'm not going to take too long because my time will run out. Esau was a man of the field, a hunter, a simple man, something like Senator Karpyshek portrays himself. He didn't speak eloquently, but he knew how to make his point. He lived and communed with nature and made his living among the critters. Here's Jacob. Now, they were twins, but one came out before the other, and I'm not going to tell you which one came out first, but I have to make the story. One was holding the heel of the other one. And when the first one was pulled out, the other one came too. He was holding the heel. And one of them was covered all over with red hair. Covered from head to toe. Well, anyway, under the old Hebrew customs, and that's what they were in those days, not Jews, Hebrews, the son got what was called the birthright if he was older. Jacob's mother liked Jacob more than she liked Esau. Jacob was, as I say, smoother than goose grease. He could slide across the floor without moving his feet. You think Michael Jackson is something when he does the moonwalk? His feet move. Jacob didn't move a muscle, and he could slide all the way across the floor. So one day Esau was out in the field. The Bible has stories that don't make sense to me. This man who knew how to survive somehow got out there and he was starving because he didn't have what he needed to eat. So the mother had Jacob tricked the father into giving the birthright, but Esau had to be taken care of first. So Jacob said, I will give you something to eat, my elder brother, and save your life if you will give me your birthright. And I'll have to finish it next time. But what Esau was reasoning probably, if I'm dead, I don't have a birthright anyway. If I give him my birthright, at least I have my life, and maybe I can make a life for myself even without my birthright. Continued next time I speak. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Chambers, Senator Aguilar has yielded you the balance of his time. He has 1 minute, 48 seconds remaining.
Thank you, Senator Aguilar. Thank you, Mr. President. And I said next time I'd speak, and I knew I'd speak again. But I thank you, Mr. Chair, for reminding me it was my third time. I was telling you about Jacob and Esau. The mother told Jacob, you go give your father this savory stew that he likes, and then you get the birthright. And Jacob said, well, I tricked Esau, but how am I going to trick my old man? His father was blind, Isaac. So she made him a covering of skin to cover him and made it smell like an animal. The mother colluding with the son to trick the father. So to shorten this whole thing up, when the scheme was unfolding, Isaac said, come here and let me touch you. And he touched him, and he felt the animal skin. He said, you have the skin of Esau, but you have the voice of Jacob. Your voice is the one uttering these words, but the words come from the lobby. And the ventriloquist, the puppeteer, is Walt Radcliffe, probably. Maybe not. Maybe I'm giving him credit he's not due. But I've been around here a long time, and these arguments being given are old to me. Now, if I had a particular affliction, that would be mine. But I wouldn't try to justify it and put it on everybody else and try thereby to make what I'm doing right. There are people harmed by the secondhand smoke, and it is unconscionable for people to stand on this floor and pretend that it doesn't. Senator Karpachek has a license to operate an establishment. That license is a privilege. It carries certain responsibilities, and the license also carries with it regulation. And the state can and should say...
Time.
Thank you, Senator Stoutman. Don't cut me off in the middle of a word next time. When the man says time, a person finishes a sentence. You can do it that way if you want to. But if that's the way this game is played, I'm going to play it, and I'm going to show you I can play it better than you. Now let me get to what it was that I was going to comment on. Senator Karpachek and Senator Fisher have made what they consider to be telling points. Senator Aguilar took care of what Senator Karpachek said. Senator Fisher, tailgating on something Senator Jeannie Combs used to say about obesity, and she said they make you get on a scale before you go in to eat. I've been on some little planes, I call them jitney planes, and they do check the weight of people. And I've seen where after they put a certain number of people on one side and a certain number of people on the other side, a heavy person was not allowed to get on that plane. Now, I saw that happen, and I was on the plane when it happened. I didn't even know they did that. I knew they weighed baggage or things like that. But they were looking at the weight of individual people. And if you all have never seen it, you ride on some of these little, and it was a commercial airplane, you will see. But again, when people have to reach that far to make a point, they have no point. We're talking about secondhand smoke that has been shown to harm people, and the tobacco industry knew it, and the lobby is in here doing the talking and calling the shots. This is the way they've always done it. They make the arrangements, and they can make them. But that bill that I'm going to hold up is LB 296. I think that's the name or the number of that HHS reorganization bill. We may as well drop the pretense now. The first shot, I feel, was fired just a few minutes ago. Sometimes when I'm accommodating, people mistake it for being a fool. You all haven't heard anybody on this floor cut off in the middle of a word when the chair said time. Well, it happened to me, but it's not going to happen again. It can happen again, but I will deal with it. Nobody here owns me.
1 minute.
And nobody here intimidates me. Not Walt Radcliffe, not any of these people who carry water for him. And I'm going to deal with the issues the way I think they should be dealt with. And when people stand on this floor and trivialize the harm done by secondhand smoke, I think that's reprehensible. This is not a jesting matter. Senator Pankin then gave an account that others could give. And others who haven't had that experience in their family know that it can happen. And to talk about this is like obesity or spreading feces on the floor, or he wants to make sausage or he skins deer. Let him do whatever he wants to do. And if he wants to smoke himself to death, and if he's got children, blow smoke in their face, let him. But anything I can do on this floor to shield others, I'm going to do it, and that's my job. Why do you think states have what are called police powers? To pass laws to protect the public health and welfare. I don't care who smokes, but I care about people who don't smoke being harmed. Thank you, Mr. President.
President, I yield the remainder of my time to Senator Chambers.
Thank you, Senator Avery. Senator Chambers, you have 2 minutes and 20 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Leadfoot. You know what people could say about Senator Leadfoot? Well, if you want to drive as fast as you want to go to Germany and drive on the Autobahn. How silly does that sound? And you know why I say silly? You'd be surprised, and maybe you wouldn't, how many white people call my office and write letters and say, go back where you came from. Well, that would be in Omaha. That's where I came from. And if they're talking about the old country, we would link arms and all go back to Africa because that's where we all came from. But I get that all the time. They write it in the paper. I'll pay one-way ticket to anywhere you want to go. So when people say that, if you don't want to eat here, don't come. Well, Senator Karpyshek may have grown up in a protected parochial environment all his life, but you know what people such as with my complexion saw in Omaha at the bottom of every menu? We reserve the right to refuse service to whomever we please, and I was the whomever they refused service to. That was during my lifetime in Omaha, Nebraska. There was an establishment right across the street from Creighton University where black students could not eat. And Creighton never took a position to do anything about it. I watch these hypocritical white people, these hypocritical religious people, because they talk as though everybody is treated the way they are, but they know what's in their mind.
1 minute.
They know these wrongful things are done, but they don't want to confront them, but you'll confront them while I'm here. There's a coarsening and a vulgarization of this society going on. Blowing smoke on people, and you got the right to do it. You listen to these idiotic talk shows where they use profanity, vulgarity, then they tell the children, but don't you use it. Those are the things that are coarsening your society. Senator Carlson, foul words don't even reside in my brain, because when you get upset, of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh, huh? So if it's in there, it's going to come out under the right circumstances. I don't even think in those terms. But these Christians do. And this argument that we're hearing against this bill makes no sense to me whatsoever. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Senator Mines. And it seems that Senator Karpyshek has become kind of the poster person for our comments this morning. And I'm going to draw Senator White into this also in order that he can give some assistance if he disagrees with what I say. People talk about property rights. Nobody owns property absolutely in this society. You all know what eminent domain means. When the overall good is at stake, all they got to do is give you what they call a fair price, and they take your property. I don't care what it is. I watched them cut right through the heart of the community where I live to build a highway that white people wanted called the North Freeway. It split that community, destroyed businesses, at least one school, a number of churches, houses, homes of elderly people. And when they lived in those houses, they didn't have a very high value. So they made sure, the big shots, that that property would continue to have a low value so that when they took it, they didn't have to give those people much money. So the amount they got could not purchase them a house anywhere. But here's where they all worked together. There was some of these vultures from the real estate industry who came around and said, we can work something out. We know you can't pay right now for this house, but we will let what you got, serve as a down payment, and we'll work the rest of it out. Well, you know how that happens. In a very short time, they couldn't make the payments that were required, and the house was foreclosed on and taken from them. So they didn't have the house that had been taken originally. The one that they'd moved into was taken from them, and the white people who ran Omaha and ran that highway through had no concern about where those people went, but I did, and I saw what happened to a lot of them. And that's what happens in this society. So property rights depend to a great extent on who the person is who holds the property. But whoever owns property must understand that there are certain, put in quotation marks, rights that hook to that property and whoever holds it, but there is a limit to it. And you cannot use your property in a way that harms somebody else or interferes with their peaceful enjoyment of their property. And that's why there's a lot of discussion about where feedlots and confinement hog feeding operations can be located, because the activity on Mr. A's property may affect the ability of everybody from C through 26 in the alphabet and their property. So there are restrictions and limitations. But I don't think we even need to get into all that for sensible people. But when the lobby is talking, they run all kind of nonsensical things in here. Now, I'm not going to say the lobby put into Senator Fisher what she said, but she says, I don't get it why these cities don't want to give up the tax. She does too get it. She says she doesn't get it why this or that isn't done by Omaha or any place else. She does get it. We all know. And I'm one of those who has opposed some of that cigarette tax money going for things other than health. But others on this floor didn't care about that. And it ought to be taxed right out of existence. But Senator Fisher also knows why tobacco and cigarettes are not going to be banned. She knows that. Those are the kind of arguments that a lobbyist will give, and so you got a lot of new people in there who don't understand anything, so that'll sound good to them and they'll accept it. And they say, oh, I said it on the floor, just like I read it on the internet, so it must be true. No, it's nonsense. Nonsense over here, nonsense over there. I'm going to wind up talking about what my good friend talked about, who said he doesn't know how big he'd be if he hadn't been stunted through the secondhand cigarette smoke. I don't know how intelligent or bright I could be if my brain hadn't been dulled by lead. I grew up in a community where lead was prominent. I'm a slow reader. I'm sure that I suffer mental and intellectual defects because of being exposed to all that lead. I have no awareness of what I might be able to do, what I might be able to understand if I hadn't been exposed to lead. But I don't run around here saying that lead is on so-and-so's property, so leave it there. I've done all I can to help get that lead taken away. So we do have a responsibility and an obligation to do something about these things that we know are detrimental to the health of the public. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Madam President and Senator Stootman. There wouldn't be any smoke where that little poodle is, and she's Cindy's. People think she's mine because I'm just kind of attached to her and she runs me. I'm her general flunky, valet, servant, and whatnot. But when, oh, he's gone. Senator Hansen was talking. No, this is on, Senator Cruz talked about strangling a rabbit. There was a saint called Augustine, some people say Augustine, and he was trying to explain why people shouldn't harm animals, so he gave this example. He said he believed when he saw a guy kick a little dog, he said, I believe that human beings come back as animals. And the guy laughed. He said, how can you say such a thing? He said, you just proved it. And the guy said, well, how is that? He said, I recognized his voice in the yelp he made when you kicked him. And the guy was abashed and he didn't do that kind of thing again. If I saw Senator Cruz strangle a rabbit, that'd be the last rabbit he ever strangled. Not because the dying gurgle of the rabbit sounded like a friend of his. He wouldn't want to suffer the fate of the rabbit. But Senator Cruz was trying to make a point, and I agree with it. His point was that he cannot discharge a gun in his front yard in the city to kill a rabbit, even if the rabbit is eating its flowers. So there are certain things that just are not allowed, and the state puts those requirements in place to protect everybody. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Wallman, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the body. Isn't that something we're talking about, smoke?
Senator Chambers, you are recognized to close on your bracket.
Thank you, Madam President. And after I speak, I will withdraw this motion. Senator White is playing on your emotions, and he's not using the brains he was born with or the good training he had in law school, except as a person trying to sway the jury when he has no good case. He said, how about those who are victims of firsthand smoke? We're not trying to prohibit anybody from smoking. It's their addiction. They can have it treated as a medical condition. Nobody is not the case. We're talking about people who don't want to be afflicted by somebody else's addiction, becoming addicted through the impingement on their right to fresh air by the addicted person. Being an addiction does not allow you to go rob a bank. Although somebody might say my addiction did it, but that won't wash. I'm sure that you wouldn't have Senator White standing up here saying strip clubs should be able to be built right in the middle of a neighborhood because a lot of people live there who want to go to a strip club, and nobody in that neighborhood has the right to say, we don't want a strip club here, because it's that person's right to have whatever kind of business he wants. I haven't heard Senator White ever stand up and say that the provision that an establishment with a liquor license cannot be within a certain distance of a religious establishment. Well, why are you respecting religion? The Constitution says that there should be a division between church and state. Yet here we are passing laws saying that churches have a right to not have a liquor establishment with within a certain distance. So Senator White is saying one thing that has no application here whatsoever. You're supposed to make the connection because he tells you to make it, but there is none. There's a gap. What about his talk of a warrantless search? Senator White, I do a lot of work to improve legislation, but I'm not going to do everybody's work on every bill. If a lawyer sees a provision in a bill that violates a constitutional right, that lawyer or any other member has an obligation to draft an amendment. I'm not going to do it all. There are a lot of things I see that ought to be changed. More of the tobacco money should go to matters such as education and prevention. The money raised from the tobacco tax ought to go to fight the evil from which the tax is raised. But people in this legislature have wanted to send it other places, and some of you, before you leave here, are going to divert it also. So all of those things are irrelevant to this bill. We're not talking about the primary smoker who can continue to smoke. Phil Harris's song could be his theme song, and Senator White probably knew it before he stopped. Smoke, smoke, smoke that cigarette. Smoke, puff, 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 and if you smoke yourself to death, tell St. Peter at the Golden Gate that I hate to make him wait, but I just got to have another cigarette. If he wants to do it, or if he doesn't want to do it, that is his struggle. But he doesn't have a right because he's addicted to foul the air of other people. Business establishment owners who get a license and a privilege from society at large has to agree to be regulated in the best interest of society. Senator Karpyshek, I don't think, could take those animals that he slaughters out on the street in front of his establishment and slaughter them there in the public. So there are rules and regulations everywhere, and it shouldn't be necessary to give these kind of examples to make the point here. What this bill is doing is legitimate, and I would say that if Senator White feels that there is an unconstitutional provision in the bill, offer an amendment. And if he persuades me, then he's got a vote from me without even providing an argument. But he's got to persuade me. Now, my understanding is that people want to allow certain time lapses in order that something can be done by people which they feel needs to be done
1 minute
in order to give this bill proper consideration. That's what I gather from the ones that I've talked to. It's not my bill. so they can handle it the way they want to. And the Speaker and I are going to discuss tomorrow that HHS bill. Now, if he's as good a speaker as y'all said he was going to be when you put him in that position, he'll be able to change my mind. So let us see how he fares. But in keeping with the promise I made, Madam President, I withdraw that motion that's pending.